Yes, recording. I love that. It speaks. All right, so the review, just the review part, just sort of a basic, okay. Now, Wendat is an Iroquoian language. As I said before, it's related to Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, Tuscarora, and St. Lawrence Iroquoian. More distantly, Cherokee, although I have a hard time finding cognates in Cherokee. They've been away for a long time. Now, the main game in Wendat linguistically is the verb, right? That's why pretty much every class I'm going to give, the main subject will be the verb, right? So most of what you learn in learning Wendat is learning how to build a verb. There's a specific order, there are specific parts. Now, a verb has to have a minimum of 3 parts. Right? Part 1, the pronominal prefix. Okay. Now, the pronominal prefix, like this is of the 3 absolutely necessary. There is stuff that's going to come before it, and I'm talking about that today. Okay, pronominal prefixes have several things involved. One is called the agent, right? The agent is always the subject when it appears. It does not appear in all verbs. The patient is the object when there is an agent, but when it's by itself, it's the subject. Usually when it's the subject, it has some kind of idea of something happening to someone, like that person's kind of the object. That's why we use agent and patient, because it's not exactly subject and object. All right, now there are 5 conjugations of verbs and nouns based on the forms that the pronominal prefixes take, right? And that'll be mentioned on the sheet, what the 5 conjugations are. All right, so that's very, very basic. Now, a verb can have 10 kinds of parts, 10. I mean, usually most verbs will have 5 to 7 parts. All right, 5 to 7 parts. But there's a possibility of 10. Number 1, the pre-pronominal prefix. Now, I'm going to be talking about one of those today. I'll be focusing mainly on that one. You can have more than 1 pre-pronominal prefix. Now, 2, the pronominal prefix, which, as I said, you always have to have it. You always have to have it. Then there's voice, which involves what's called the reflexive, which is kind of each other. It's usually translated as each other. And the semi-reflexive, which has a sense of happening to. Then there are noun roots. The most often you see a noun root is not by itself. It can stand by itself, but it's usually incorporated into a verb. Usually. All right. Now, there are joiner vowels. That's just, a phonetic necessary. Then there's the verb root, of course. Then there are root suffixes, and you can have more than one of those. The aspect, which is always necessary. Now, there are 5 aspects. I've mentioned this before, but it's just kind of review. There are 5 aspects. The most common one is the stative. It means to be in a state of. It's happening, it's being. Then there's the habitual, which means often, frequently. There's the punctual, that refers to happened or will happen or would happen one time. There's the purposive, which means going to, either intent or prediction. And then there's the imperative, which is a suggestion or a command, keeping in mind that there's no word in Wendat that translates as order or command. There's no word that technically means obey. You're with somebody's word or you're not with it. That's as close as they come. I could do whole thing on words they don't have, right? All right, but I won't. All right, then there's aspect suffixes. They come after, specific suffixes. And then there's clitics, which are something else again, right? There's a few of those, okay? So those are the parts. Those are the parts that a verb can have. Any questions about that? That's kind of review, but kind of some of you it's kind of new, or you forgot something. That's cool. All right, so no questions? Okay. What I'm going to talk about today is one of my favorite topics in the language, the dualic. What it does, it's a prepronominal prefix. It means two, but it's a real broad sense of two-ness as we know it. It's different from English or French sense of two. It's usually represented by the sound te, T-E, te. And it's in the number one, or number two rather, when we were doing numbers, teondi means two, but literal translation is they two are two. All right, now I'm going to use, most of my examples are with names, partially because my book, The Names of the Wendat, is coming out probably early next month, yay. And I've got another book that I'm going to approach publishers with called The Names of the Wendat. The Wendat, I have like over 600 names. And I've never seen anybody ever study the names of a people. And the names are so important. They are owned by clans. There are stories usually that explain them. Sometimes I can translate a story or a name, but I can tell you in a way, I don't know what it means because I don't know the story. Like, for example, there's a name called Mud Eater, which later on became a surname, right? The story behind that was that Wendat had been attacked by settlers and they escaped so far, and a settler boy, kind of got caught in between, and he was trying to hide in the mud by a river. They found him, and he looked like he was eating mud, hence the name, right? And it became an important name. It became an important name. All right, so, okay, so number one, te hashem dayeti. Now, you usually stress the second last syllable. That's sort of basic rule in Iroquois languages. Now, this means he bears two names, which is it's an interesting name because you wonder, okay, what are those names, right? Now, if you look at it, you see it begins with the te, right? That tells you right up front, this is a dualic, although, unfortunately, the negative has the same sound. So you have to kind of listen to the whole name before you know that. So te, dualic. Then there's ha, which is the masculine singular agent. When you see a pronominal prefix that starts with H, you know it's masculine. One of the problems that Brebeuf ran into when he was dealing with the language was, being French, he wasn't really good at hearing initial H's rather, so he missed them sometimes, which probably made for a lot of laughter on the part of the Wendat. Hey, listen to this guy, right? Okay, so ha is the masculine singular agent. Now, shend means name. It means name. It's consonant conjugation because it starts with a consonant. That's the joiner vowel. And then there's the verb yete, which means to bear plus be in a state. So the verb root is to bear, and it's in, when I say the state of aspect, the most common one. Most names are with the state of aspect, talking about being in a state. All right, any questions about that so far? All righty. Page 2, Sandra. Okay.
Actually, it's Sylvie doing it right now, but that's okay.
Okay. Sylvia, then. Sorry, I must not have been listening. My wife says I don't listen half so often as I should. Okay, now he is splitting the country in two. Obviously, whoever had that name was powerful. That's a powerful name. That's a powerful name. Splitting the country in two. Again, begins with te. Again, there's the ha, masculine. This time, though, it's the masculine singular patient. It's the patient this time, even though it takes the same form, because the conjugation starts with o. Onde means to have as country. Now, you can convert a verb into a noun stem by adding sh, right? So Ondasha means country, So you add the nominalizer, it makes it a noun. Right? And there are a lot of nouns that came from verbs. Okay. Then ore means to split. And with that verb, you always have the dualic. You can't not have it. To split, because a split implies there's two, you know. Okay. So, and again, the state of aspect, no surprise, no surprise. You may hear the birds now. They're having a discussion. They often do have these discussions. All
John,
right. Yeah.
John, I've got a question if nobody else does.
Okay.
Since we have the have as country verb root,
Yeah.
would you translate as he is splitting his country in two?
I think what you'd have to do with that is add a semi-reflexive.
Okay.
Which means he is splitting a country that is his.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I would do for that. You know, that's an interesting question. Yeah. I hadn't thought of that.
Thank you.
All right. Now, the next one, I'm doing the splitting thing here. He is splitting the sky in two.
May I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure, shoot.
What about if the sentence was, she is splitting the country in two?
Then instead of ha, you would have ya.
Yeah, okay. And
because the Y is commonly used in the feminine zoic. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, no problem. And you know, you could put any pronoun that way. All right. Now next, he is splitting the sky in two. Again, a powerful name. I suspect it has to do with thunder, because the thunderer is there's a lot of stories about thunderers that the thunderers. It includes that there was a Wendat child that was the child of Thunderer, and the characterization he takes on is the sun shower. He's the sun shower, right? So, and there's a lot of words with sky, because sky is very, very important, because they see the sky, it's there. It's more present than it generally is with us. So it's an important noun root. You see it very, very often. Okay, so again, we get the te, the ha. This time, rohi is sky. Rohi is sky. And it belongs, because it begins with a consonant, it is a consonant conjugation. And again, same verb, to split. But you couldn't have, like he is splitting his sky, because you can't own the sky. Can't do. You know. But again, you would use Ya for she is splitting the sky. There are a number of names in which there are both male and female versions. There are differences in the names. You know, you could see, you can sort of tell, okay, this has got to be a female name, not just by the pronominal prefix, by what is being talked about. You say, okay, that's got to be a male name. One of the unfortunate things is in the 19th century, certainly for the Wyandot, a problem was for the settler culture. They wanted these people to have surnames. Now, the names, like I said, they belong to clans. Typically, you know, most names are clans. You can have nicknames. They did have nicknames sometimes, and you will often go through several names, not just one. You may be given one as a child, it's a clan name, but you're going to get another one later on when you're mature, and the person that had the older person's name may have died or moved on to another name. And so you would not typically have one name in your life. You would go through several names. So anyway, so the government, the American government, Canadian government said, you got to have a surname. So unfortunately, even though clans were matrilineal, you know, determined along the female line, the names that got picked were all male names, either in translation or written in the original language. I didn't know about that until I did the research. I said, I can't believe this, right? They only chose male names for the surnames. I don't like that, but that's the way it happened. You know. Okay, now the next name is a very famous name. A log is split in two. Right? Split log is a name that a lot of the Wyandot had. It's the name that you can mark the generations of people called split log. It's a significant name. I mean, all names, of course, will go over generation, but this one that's recorded, and you know, I have it for several centuries. Oh, here's another split log, right? Here's another split log. Now here, because the log is not masculine, because it's an object, like the feminine zoic, the term zoic means it also refers to an animal or an object, right? It's used that way. Okay, so because it's a log that's being talked about, you use the feminine zoic form. And because it's happening to the log, you use the patient form, right? So that's that combination, right? Because, you know, that tells you, aha. Now, also, you know, there's also the semi-reflexive, which says happening to. It's happening or has happened or will happen to whatever you're just about to talk about. Then ront, which means tree, log, or pole, is, and I know I talked about this before, this gives us the word Toronto. In Mohawk, it was Tikaranto, poles in water. It referred to the Atherley Narrows, where there were fish weirs, cedar fish weirs for literally thousands of years. So when the Mohawk went up there to live for a while, they just translated the Anishinaabe name, which means essentially the same thing, a little bit different. And then because going up the Humber was to go to Tikaranto, Fort Toronto, you know, was named, it was misspelled and changed to TO from TA, and the K was dropped. But yeah, no, it's the same. That's where Toronto came from. And yet as I often have to say, probably 99% of everybody who lives in Toronto doesn't know what the name means.
Mhm.
Maybe 99.99, you know, but I keep trying to get that across to people because it's important. You know,
Mhm.
it's a large city. It has an indigenous name that should be remembered. That should be remembered. And the story of it should be remembered. Okay. So that was that one, right?
I have a question.
Two.
The
Yeah.
K, the K in Toronto,
Yeah.
does that exist in Wendat, or is that a convention?
No, what it is Mohawk has a K where Wendat has a Y.
Mhm.
And the T is another prepronominal prefix that means, in this case, it means at. So, so the T is at, the K is it, the ront is tree, the O means to be in water, which is pretty handy, you know, given it's almost the same as the French. In fact, the first time it was written down, it was spelled T-E-A-U. So it must, you know, traditional translation's pretty close, right?
So you said that this is a translation from Anishinaabe, but that was, after all, Huron territory, wasn't it? And
Yeah.
was there did the Hurons, did the Wendat give a name similar to Toronto to that lake?
Well, they had a different name for Lake Simcoe. They may have had a name for the
Narrows, right, on the Coochie.
Narrows, but it's not recorded, unfortunately, which is too bad.
So the T in Toronto is not the dual, it is a preposition, let's say.
Well, it means it means that.
Okay. Also, the stative aspect, I guess in English, we would have a stative aspect with the simple present rather than the present continuous.
Yeah.
So is the meaning closer to he splits the sky and he splits the country? Because splitting sounds like it might be punctual.
Yeah, well, it can generally mean just being in a state. So but if you wanted to say he has split the sky, then you use the punctual.
I see. And maybe at some point you could tell us your name and what it means.
Well, my name I got was originally Jean de Brebeuf's name.
Yeah.
There's no je in Wendat. There's a sh, but not a je. So they imitated his, they copied his first name. They did that with some of the first Jesuits that they met. So it was Chon, but to make it a masculine name, they added the H before it. So it's a copy from the French plus a masculine pronoun.
Can you write it then on your screen?
Okay. I would have to do that. Okay, go ahead.
So it's Hechon. Hechon.
Hechon.
Yeah. And, I was thrilled when I was called that because it was Brebeuf's name, it was Chaumonot's name, and also Father Daniel Richer. All three of them received that name. It came to have the meaning, like I wish I knew which clan adopted Brebeuf. I don't know. Most of the later priests I know who they were adopted by. But for Brebeuf, I don't know. I wish I did, because that would tell you a lot. That would do a lot of explaining about who he related to and that kind of thing. He had a couple of Turtle Clan people that he was close to, so it could be It could be, have become a Turtle Clan name, but that's just idle speculation.
John, before, so just because I missed the beginning of your explanation, for Toronto, we have the first T that is at.
The K means it.
Okay.
Well, the K A, because it was originally Toronto, not Toronto.
Okay.
And the Rant means tree, pole, or log, and it was referring to the poles that were stuck in the Atherley Narrows because the water flows fast there. And if you put enough poles in, the fish can't get through. So it makes a lovely trap where you can get fish.
Okay, I'll
And
just
Neo
put it.
means to be in water.
Okay, and I'll just explain
That will
it
be in the
right
statement.
here.
Yeah. That's neat. I'm glad you got into that because it's, to me, that's important. To me, that's important.
Thank you.
All right. Now, a lake is split in two while we're doing, it's on this one. A lake is split in two. Now, dualic again, and it plus lake. The unter should be familiar to you as well because it's in the Wendat word Ontario, which means it is a large lake, which is a good name because it is a large lake. It's basic. When people make up or imagine indigenous names, they often come up with this really flowery, strange stuff. Whereas in the languages, just give me a description that basic, that relates, right? So Ontario, it is a large lake, works. It works. It's like Niagara Falls, right? Don't believe anything they tell you in Niagara Falls about what the name means. It refers to the neutral word for neck. Because I have interpreted it this way, because the Niagara River was first given to the Niagara River, not the falls. There's a whole other different word for falls that kind of cuts the space between the two Great Lakes, Ontario and Erie, into a neck shape. That's my interpretation of it. It's a could be right, could be wrong. I think it's right, but hey, don't know. But it has nothing to do with no shining, falling waters or anything like that.
And you say it's neutral because it's from the neutral nation.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. All right. Okay. So anything else about that? Again, it's sort of being in a state of being split in two. Right. All right. So we'll shift over page 3. Now, here's where the dualic kind of spreads beyond what we would normally think of two-ness. Okay. Two hands. Something you do vigorously with two hands requires the dualic. So to seize, you do it with your hands. So it requires the dualic. So he is seizing a village. Te hondataha, right? Te tu, ho he, it's using the patient. Dat means village. And here we come to another name in this country, Canada, which means village. In Wendat, it's Yandata. One thing that's distinctive about Wendat is that D after the N. If you have N plus a vowel, the Wendat would have a D. The other languages don't. They don't.
And the N, John, a question on the N, does
Yeah.
that indicate a consonant, or does it indicate that the preceding vowel is nasalized?
In this particular case, what you would have is probably, I think probably for the both of those both of those vowels that come before an N are nasalized. I would
Right.
say they're both nasalized. So it'd be Tehon, Tehon de Tawa, right? So it'd be nasalized, right? It's interesting how when English speakers got a hold of the language, they really spelled it badly because they didn't have any nasal vowels. And when I was, for 5 years, I was the tribal linguist for the Wendat Nation of Oklahoma. Getting them to pronounce nasal vowels was really difficult.
Mhm.
Obviously, they'd never seen a Montreal Canadiens game on the television, right? But anyway, but no, it was really hard. I didn't, I guess growing up in Canada, like nasal vowels is part of what you use, right? But I didn't realize how in the southern states, they don't have it. And you have to, okay, now say, oh, now hold your nose, like trying little tricks like that. It was funny. It was just kind of funny. Oh, okay, this is going to be hard. Okay. Now, then the next one is, oh yeah, just that, yeah, kind of, yeah, being St. Lawrence Iroquois. Cartier recorded a lot of words, not a whole lot of words in the language, which gives us a sense of what it was like. There are a couple of linguists who think maybe it was 2 languages or 2 dialects. What I really enjoyed discovering was in Gabriel Sergao's dictionary that there were St. Lawrence Iroquoian words as well as Wendat words in there. He knew there were dialects. He knew that. He said that right in the beginning of writing his dictionary. But he didn't know that it was included St. Lawrence Iroquoian. He didn't know that.
John, could it be that the St. Lawrence Iroquoians, or some of them, took refuge
Yes.
in Wendat territory?
Yeah. And they did that with several people. They did that with the Abenaki as well. So yeah, they took refuge. There were, and mostly women, from what we know. The archaeologists will tell us that there is pottery in the Wendat villages that is characteristic St. Lawrence Iroquoian pottery. So we know the women were there, right? Because only St. Lawrence Iroquoian women would use that particular pottery style. So here, I mean, this is the first linguistic evidence, and I didn't anticipate it. It was just first I said, look, there's an M. There is no M in Wendat. There would later on be an M in Wyandot, which developed sometime, I think, the late 19th century. All of a sudden, no. Earlier on in the 19th century. In the 19th century, they developed an M. Because language is dynamic, right? Language changes. Language doesn't stay always the same. And they were exposed to people that had an M. So, take a few decades of that and you might develop it. All right, now scalp. There are a number of names, a number of words with scalp in it. I mean, I know that's a very sensitive historical question about scalping. Yeah, they scalped people. But as I always like to say, yeah, indigenous people scalp people, and the settlers came in and made it a monetary thing. you know, well, we'll give you X number of dollars or whatever, or if you bring us a scalp. The Micmac people of the maritime provinces in Quebec, if I believe correctly, there was a bounty put on them that has never been taken off. I mean, that was true 10 years ago. I suspect it still is, because British law becomes Canadian law unless it's changed. So it's never changed. Anyway, sorry, that's an aside. Okay, so I put that one in just because, okay, it is a name and it does relate. And again, we have the same kind of parts, that you find in the others. Now, 2 feet. 2 feet. Things done with 2 feet have the dualic. Right? So they have the dualic. So in the Wolf clan, this is kind of an obvious one for the Wolf clan. Tahiti, he is running in a pack, is a Wolf clan name. Well, there you see the clan origin of that name. You see it right up front, right? You know it's Wolf clan. Even if I didn't know otherwise it was Wolf clan, I would know that was Wolf clan. Now, sometimes with the T before the H, the A is dropped, and the way this was typically written, the A sound, like it wasn't Teho, but it was Taho, and that's very close. So that was the way it tended to get written. So that's the way I write it, because that was the way it was typically written. And again, 2 feet, therefore dualic. Right? So it's that regular dual rule. Okay, so yeah. Now, Teon Yuatasta, he often enables us to, it often enables us to stay standing. Now, who knows what that referred to? I'd love to know the history of that name, but it's not forthcoming. And here we have as the subject, we have the it, and as the agent subject. And then the first person plural patient is the patient, it's the object of it. Now, one thing that Wendat had too was a distinction between 2 and more than 2. So if this particular word, it often enables us to, then that W would be gone because it means plural. It means plural. So for the patient, there is a distinction between being 2 and being more than 2, which is handy with relationships. It's handy, like if you're going to say, we are siblings, or we are a couple, we are spouses, it's handy to have that too. And stand is used very often. It is a very common verb. It is one of the most frequently used verbs. You use it with trees, you use it with plants, use it with lots of things. Stand, it almost has the meaning to exist for things that stand, It's not specifically stressing the standing aspect. It's just saying, okay, it's there. It happens to be standing.
John, I have a question about the second part.
Okay.
ONYWA.
Yeah.
Some people refer to Iroquoian languages as fusional.
Yeah.
And that one aspect of learning them would be to learn, for example, ONYWA as a chunk in its own right, something that couldn't be analyzed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Can it be analyzed into the two parts, or is it learned as a chunk?
Well, you can do either. The wa part is a plural, right? So number is something that pronominal prefixes take. The on, well, if it were, say it were, we are standing. Say it were, we are standing. Whoops. Whether that's me or you.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I can still hear. I just can't see.
Oh, we can see you.
Oh,
Yes.
all right. I'll go blind then here.
And I'm still sharing.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Um,
Okay. So it might have something to do with my computer. It's a little wonky sometimes. Now, if you had to say we are using a consonant stem verb, you would, it would be ayuwa. So in a way, the all has a meaning. It's telling you, okay, this is patient, and there's more than one. So it has two parts in that way. Ayuwa be, okay, it's patient, it's agent, and it's plural, although the agent doesn't distinguish between dual and plural in that.
Okay.
All right. Now, causative instrumental root suffix. This is often, like the word enable often appears, or it causes something to happen. Now, there are two causatives. Oh, yeah, good. Yeah, there are two causatives. This particular one is limited to just sort of saying, okay, it's causing something, it's enabling something to happen. It's a fairly common root suffix. You see, when you see an ST near the end of the word, you can pretty well know, okay, that's what it is. And then here we've got the habitual, and it frequently has the sound ha to it, or sometimes there's an S. So it just says it's frequent, it's often that something happens. So you might be talking here about a stool of some sort, or a pole, or something you use to stand or keep standing. Like if somebody had, say, a cane, they would use this. That would be a good word for cane.
Okay.
All right. So for the next one, I wish I knew why that had cut off like that. Anyway,
we can still see you.
Well, that's the only important part, I know. Anyway, the next one has to do with snowshoes. The same works with any kind of shoe. Anything that's on both feet, it's going to have a dualic with a verb. And it is literally the verb to have snowshoes on.
Mhm.
And it's the patient because it's happening to you. You're the subject of the sentence, but it's happening to you. So you're going to use the patient.
Mhm.
And otherwise, I'm trying to remember. Yeah, there is a noun for snowshoe, but it's not used here because you don't need to, because there's a verb as well. And given a choice, a verb is more like, just because it's a state of having them on, right?
Yep.
And again, that's right. All right. Now, 2 eyes. Again, there's a two-ness to the number of eyes you have. So it applies here. Now, this is among the Wyandotte, this is a prairie turtle name, male. Now, obviously, there's a story here because somebody is giving the request or command, hey, look at me, look at me. So it's part of a story, clearly. And who knows what part of the story or what the story was, because we don't, I'm trying to think, I think we only have a couple of the prairie turtle names, which is unfortunate because it will be interesting. I mean, sometimes I think if you had all the names of the people, you could put together stories of the clans better, right? So now here, the imperative is both a prefix and a suffix, comes before the verb and after the verb. So what you have here, you have to plus command or request, the dualic, and the imperative aspect suffix. So you would have that T anyway, even if it wasn't dualic. And the aye is the patient form of the first person. The agent form, you drop the A, would just be yay. So if you had somehow I am looking, it would begin with something like te.
J'aurais une question. Est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Oui, oui, oui. Allez-y.
Vous disiez tout à l'heure qu'il n'y avait pas de verbe pour dire obéir et que la forme impérative,
Yeah.
Vous comprenez le français?
Not as much as I'd like to.
I can try in English, sorry.
Okay, no, I kind of knew what you were saying.
Okay, there was the imperative mode. It could be either a suggestion or an order. And
Yeah, it's,
is
sorry.
it when there is a two imperative mark, a prefix one and a suffix one?
Yeah.
Is it more like an order or does it make a difference?
No, it doesn't make a difference. Either way,
Okay.
either way, you have to have those two forms. They are necessary in it. Yeah. So it's hard to know. Like it's again, there is a respect relationship with the person you're talking to. And
Okay.
Yeah. The terms you use, the kind of things you use in interaction are different. Like, for example, there's no "you're welcome."
Mm-hmm.
I've been asked to translate that, and I said, no, you can't do that. Somebody just says, thank you. And that's it. And maybe they'd say, the other person say thank you back, but there's no "you're welcome." There's none of that sort of European style. I don't know of any of the languages I've worked with, whether there is "you're welcome." There isn't in Anishinaabe. I don't think there is in Inuktitut. I don't think there is in Micmac, which I studied for a year. So it's just not a form that they have.
Merci.
Okay, so now the other one is you're using the noun plus a verb here. So you are staring, which literally means causing your eyes to be strengthened. The S is the you singular form, second person singular patient. We have the semi-reflexive again. The semi-reflexive will change the conjugation of a verb, because the semi-reflective changes the consonant conjugation into an A conjugation, because the first sound in the semi-reflexive is A. The reflexive is atat, and it's used in some kinship terms. There's a, sort of say, we are siblings, we're brothers, we are brothers and sisters. You would use that, right? Because it's both of you at the same time. This is the main word for I, and the main noun for I is a. Again, the joiner vowel, because you can't have an R followed by an N like this. Now, this verb is shortened here. The nd, be strong, is actually usually, what is it? I'm trying to think now. Oh yeah, it's ra-nd, but not here, not here. Again, consonant conjugation. You see how often that comes up, right? That's going to frequently come up. One of the mistakes that Brebeuf had at first was putting everything in the consonant conjugation, because he heard it so often. Okay, and here's the straightforward causative root suffix, cause to be, cause to be. It is very common. It's probably the most common root suffix. It's also used to refer to a place. You would have something at the beginning of the word that means where, and then you've got this, that's, like I say, often used for place as well. I don't know why, it just is. And the E is to be in a state, the state of aspect. The E sound like that very frequently occurs, meaning the state of aspect. If you see a word that ends with that sound in Wendat, probably it will be in the state of aspect. It's probably there. Okay, so that again gives the, so there, other things. Interesting though, the verb to see doesn't use, I write that there, the verb to see doesn't use the dualic. I guess it's the sense of, I'm not sure why that is. It just is. There are other things that use the dualic. Things are kind of surprising, but okay. The last category of things that use the dualic are loud sounds. So it includes sneezing, yawning, things like that. They use the dualic. Now, to lament or cry out often, this case, we have the, again, the sound for she, the feminine zoic singular agent. They would use it as well if it was talking about an animal that makes a crying sound, right? They would use the same thing. The verb to lament, asenqua, is an a conjugation verb, right? Because it begins with an a. And again, here we have the habitual aspect. So it means sort of continually, frequently, often. It's a repeated action. Not a single time repeated action, because you have to, a whole other construction for that. But one that is frequent. It was used a lot when the Wendat encountered people, Frenchmen that were like blacksmiths, carpenters, that type of thing, where they had a job that required a repeated action. They pretty much always would have the habitual, like the one for blacksmith is kind of like he hits iron. So, and it would be he often hits, not just a state of, but this is something he frequently does, right? Because it sort of tells you the characteristic. Okay, and now a rooster is crowing. Now, you would, to know that you're referring to a chicken, you need the word for chicken after that. Okay, yes, it is a chicken, right? You need that. Now, the word for chicken, obviously they didn't have chickens before, but it would refer kind of generically to doves and pigeons, because they're very similar. And I know a number of languages that do that. There wasn't a traditional word for it. So all right. So again, the dualic begins. Now, interestingly, it has the patient, the feminine zoic singular patient for this one. Kind of interesting, right? Like it happens with respect to you, as much. And then the T here, caused to be, again, we've got the causative root suffix. So you're causing a crying out sound, right? There's a crying out sound connected with you, and it's being caused. And then finally, again, in a state, it ends with E, with an E sound, right? So that's very common. Like I say, you see a word ends with an E sound, you can pretty well know that it is the state of. Just like with the habitual, if it ends with an AS or an HA, you know it's habitual. If it ends with an E, you know you're probably going to have just an E. You know it's going to be going to, it'll be the purposive going to, either it's a prediction, like in Winnipeg, it's going to snow. And if it ends with an A, then there's a good chance that you're going to say something is a completed action or will be a completed action. So sometimes you just see that and you know right away. It's something that's easily determined. So how are we doing for time? My screen is completely blank here. I don't know why.
It's been an hour, and
Okay.
we reached the end of the document. Sandra, you'll keep it on just in case somebody has or requires that we go up the document for a question. But John, unfortunately, I have to leave. I really apologize that
No,
was
it's
not
okay.
planned. but Sandra will take over. And Marie-Christine, if there are questions, please make sure that John gets them because he can't see. He's blind.
Yeah.
Merci beaucoup, John. À la
Okay.
prochaine fois. Merci. Thank you,
À la
John.
prochaine. Okay. Anything you want to know about Wendat, or even about some of the related languages? For me, Mohawk is always looks like that. Mohawk and Oneida always look the most like, sound the most like Wendat. You know, when I see a Mohawk word, it's usually I can translate it. Not always, but usually, because they're very close.
Okay.
I have a question about the way you go about kind of circumventing when you look at historical documents, and obviously when it's a French person who's transcribing Wendat or Mohawk language, they will spell it differently and sometimes with their own methods, depending on transcribing. So I was wondering, like, how, like, do you guess what they meant, or how do you account for these like differences in hearing and then transcribing onto paper?
Well, fortunately, generations of Jesuits worked with the language. I mean, they were great linguists. So there was a consistency with that. The first 10 years or so, it's messy. But after that, it's consistent. And so you can, and, I mean, there were good dictionaries of Wendat before there were good dictionaries and grammars of English. I would say that. I can say that because I've seen 17th century dictionaries of English. They're garbage, they're horrible, but not as good as this, So again, like the early ones, and I know when I worked with Sagar, who, published this in the 1630s, I've got to kind of guess. I'm taking the perspective of a Jesuit who lived much later, to figure, okay, what's he trying to say? What is he trying to represent? But Sagar had a fairly good ear. He had a good ear. Same thing with Brebeuf. He had a good ear for the language. He knew what sounds were being represented. So, it isn't a big problem. The short form answer for that is, it's not a big problem because people would learn, Jesuits would learn by rewriting a dictionary, copying a dictionary, adding what they heard and how they heard it, so that they got good with it. And the Wendat would correct them. Unfortunately, we don't have the names of the people, of most of the people they worked with, but they would be good linguists too, in part because they were surrounded by Algonquians and had to know something of the Algonquian languages. So they would not be monolingual. If you were a trader, you would not be monolingual.
Just something to say, I have looked some dictionary, manuscript dictionary of Chamonix. He used Greek alphabet sometimes. That's very interesting.
Yeah, well, that would be what, as a Jesuit, you're trained in Greek. That's part of the training. And he taught, and I don't think he taught I'm trying to remember who taught in Greek. I think it was Chamonix. Something that's coming out, I guess, this year. I worked with some Belgian scholars on the work of Pierre Poitier, who lived with the Wyandot in the Detroit area. And they taught me, because they were linguistic profs, they taught me how much Greek influenced how the Jesuits put together their grammars.
Mhm.
I mean, I just assume, I assume Latin and it's there, you can see it, but I don't, I've studied some Latin, I've never studied any Greek.
Mhm.
So they informed me of how much Greek was involved in the grammars. That was, that is a good, made a good point with that. Yeah, Greek was involved.
Yeah. Okay. If you have other questions, do not hesitate. No more question, no more comment. Agnes said she has to leave. Some people have to leave.
Oh yeah, because it's a busy time of the day.
Yeah, but it was a fascinating lesson again, John.
Thank you.
And I'm very glad that all the people came again, and I'm very glad that you were available. So we are going to meet another time in 2 weeks, and we will send.
You're back.
We will send you some. You will send us, the lesson, and we will continue, but it's fascinating. And if there's no more question, then I will say to everyone, I will wish everyone a happy long weekend, and I will thank you again, John, and see you.
I really enjoy it. It's fun for me because I don't get to talk about this stuff often, and it's where my heart is.
Yeah, it's fascinating for us to learn about Wendat, and it's a fascinating language.
It is. It constantly engages me.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you everyone for coming, and thank you, John, and see you in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye.